Hey everybody, this is Tracy Chen and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about professional engineers in Australia and how they can obtain permanent residency or even a skilled visa. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the principal lawyer at Mason Chen Law Group. We help people in Australia as well as overseas achieve the Australian dream of getting a visa here in Australia. Now, I have been receiving a lot of queries for pathways for engineers. Now, as we know, there are lots of different types of engineers. Now, today we're just going to talk about professional engineers. This doesn't include those who are in IT. I've actually made a separate video for those who are in IT. They're more network computer engineers, software engineers. Today's engineers, we're talking more electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, as well as civil engineers. So it covers that cohort of professionals. Now, where do we start with this? It's a difficult one because there's so many aspects to this. But I think the one most important thing to consider is, firstly, do you have the relevant qualifications to become an engineer? So in Australia, an engineer must have completed a bachelor degree or higher, and Australia has certain standards for that. Usually that degree is 4 years or more. I'm not sure if there's many that are 3 years. Most of the engineer degrees in Australia are 4 years and above. So a civil engineering degree, and that's at bachelor level. At master level, obviously these are only 2-year degrees, but to enter, you must have already completed a bachelor degree. So if you've got an Australian degree and it's Bachelor of Civil Engineering or Bachelor of Mechanical Engineering, then that's fine. If you've completed a 3-year bachelor degree in Australia, that also should meet the requirements. Overseas degree is kind of when it gets a little bit tricky. You really have to check whether your degree is equivalent to an Australian degree. Now, again, rule of thumb, if it's over 4 years, usually it's equivalent. However, your migration agent or lawyer would also check this for you. We have this program called Country Education Profiles, and we check all the degrees to make sure they're compatible to Australian degree. I can't say I've had many issues with people who've done 4-year degrees, but some have completed, for example, a 2-year degree and it's called a Bachelor of Engineering overseas, but in Australia, it's only equivalent to an associate degree because it's only 2 years. So in that case, there may be some issues in qualifying for that occupation. But again, if you've got 4 years or more, you can confidently go to an agent and lawyer and, talk about your migration pathways, and hopefully it will meet the requirements for that. Now, depending on the visa that you apply for, you may or may not need a skills assessment. Now, for all skilled visas, for example, the 189, 190, or even the 491 temporary work visa, it requires a skills assessment. So we'll talk about how to get that skills assessment. For the 186 direct entry, which is employer sponsored, you may have an employer in Australia who's willing to sponsor you. You definitely need a skills assessment for that. However, for the 482 temporary skilled shortage, we have a lot of engineers that are employed and sponsored by their company under the 482 visa program, and not all require a skills assessment. So again, that will be case-to-case basis, but obviously that's a question that you can ask your migration agent or lawyer. So the body that does do skills assessment for engineers in Australia is called Engineers Australia. We call it EA for short. And you would go to the website and see how you can apply for a skills assessment. So first of all, you need to check your qualification with Engineers Australia. So you would run it through their qualification checker, which they have on their website. And depending on the country you received it in, the type of qualification, how long you studied for, and whether that degree is accredited will form the pathway on how you apply for a skills assessment. So there is a number of universities across the world which are accredited by Engineers Australia essentially. So the skills assessment pathway is a little bit easier. You basically just submit your documents and they'll give you a skills assessment. So it makes it a little bit easier for those. I can't remember which ones are that from the top of my head, but look, there's quite a few. You can run it through the checker, then you'll be able to see if your degree is accredited. Now, obviously that is ideal, but if not, you'll have to do the skills assessment through one of the other pathways. Now, as mentioned before, Engineers Australia assess degrees in these engineering disciplines. So it's professional engineers, engineering associates, engineering managers, as well as engineering technologists. They all are very different areas of engineering. So there's a couple of different accords, and when you run your degree and qualification through the checker, you better see there's like the Australian qualification, there's the Washington Accord, as well as the Dublin Accord, and I think the last one is Sydney Accord. And if you've got an accredited degree, excellent, you just lodge your skills assessment directly. If not, you may need to write a competency demonstration report. So you'll need to write an essay essentially on projects that you have worked with in your discipline, whether it's in civil engineering projects, electrical engineering projects, and it will test your knowledge, skills, and competency. And based on that, they will provide you with a positive skills assessment. Now, most of our clients who have taken this pathway have been able to successfully get the skills assessments because you do projects at school. A lot of people who graduate, they go into the workforce, they've done projects at work too, so they can write about them as well. It's not too hard. If this is your profession, I don't think it'd be too difficult for you. I definitely think that you can do it. So once you have the positive skills assessment, that gives you a lot more options in looking into visa categories in Australia. So although I'm not going through the specific requirements at each visa category, what I will talk about is what visas you can look forward to applying to. Now remember, in Australia, although there's lots of different visa types, these are the main ones I'd probably be looking at if I was doing a consultation with a, for example, electrical engineer or civil engineer who wanted to migrate to Australia. So let's just say you've got your positive skills assessment. You will always need English. Now for the employer sponsored, the rule of thumb is generally competent English, so 6 each. Temporary skills shortage, actually depending on the stream, the requirements will be even less. But I'm just gonna say competent for now because the direct entry employer sponsored visa requires 6 each. And to be honest, to work as an engineer in Australia, you probably need to have at least competent English. So let's just go with that for now. So as a civil engineer, electrical engineer, I'll drop a list of all the different type of engineers. You could potentially apply for the temporary skilled shortage employer sponsored visa. For that one, you need an employer to sponsor you. So normally what people would do is apply for jobs in Australia, and then an employer may pick up your application, interview you, and then during the interview, you'll say to them, hey, I'm actually overseas. I can come and work. I have a lot to contribute and add to your company, but I need to be sponsored. And look, don't worry, a lot of Australian companies sponsor. We actually work with a lot of engineering companies and they bring in engineers from overseas all the time. So the opportunities are definitely there. You just have to find them in the right place. The other option is the direct entry 186 employer sponsored visa. And that one also requires to be sponsored, but that is permanent residency. So I don't think many employers will sponsor you for direct permanent residency straight away. I think most employers will take the option of sponsoring you under the temporary skills shortage 482 visa first. And that's normal, that's fair. And then once you've worked with them for a couple of years, then they may look at the 186 for you. There's also a 186 temporary residence transition stream, which I've done videos on as well. This is probably the second step after the 482, the 186. But in saying that, you need your skills assessment, you need to have competent English, and you may come across an employer who's extremely generous and is happy to sponsor the employee for the 186 visa. Now, if you're in Australia, it's probably less of a problem. If you're in Australia already on a visa and you qualify for the 186, then it's probably less of a problem. But for overseas, if you're looking for an employer to sponsor you on the direct entry 186, I think it's a little bit harder because this visa processing time can be 1 year to 18 months. So if an employer wants to sponsor you, they want you here right away. The 482 processing time is a lot less. It's like a couple months, and some accredited sponsors, it may only take them 1 or 2 weeks to get the visa approval. So again, 186 direct entry is probably unlikely unless you're already well known to the company and there's an existing relationship there. However, look, most of the engineering occupations are eligible for both of these visa streams. So I'll drop it in the comments below. The next one is if you can't find an employer, then you'd be looking under like an independent skilled visa stream. So first of all, we'll talk about the temporary work visa. So it's a temporary work visa 491. I've done lots of different videos. It's different from state to state. So the requirements are different, whether you're onshore or offshore. You can look at my videos. I've done a lot of these, but it's definitely an option for engineers. We've had plenty of engineers invited under the 491 recently. The next option would be the 190 skilled nominated visa. So it's very similar. It's dependent on the state and you have to meet the state requirements. I drop a link below to some of the videos I have in relation to this, but this one is permanent residency. So once you are invited and you're granted this, you will be in Australia, whether you've applied as offshore candidate or an onshore candidate, you will be in Australia as a permanent resident, which is obviously ideal, but obviously it's more competitive and harder than the 491. And you'll see a lot of states, if you're an offshore applicant, they're not inviting offshore applicants for 190. They're only inviting offshore applicants for 491. And what I advise my clients is, look, if you're coming from overseas, I would just take what you can get. Like permanent residency is great, but it's not that easy to get. The 491 has a secure pathway to permanent residency, but you would first come to Australia as a temporary visa on the 491 visa. So that's my advice on the 491 and 190. Amazing if you get the 190, but getting the 491 is not a bad option either, because it gets you to Australia. Yes, you have to be a temporary resident for a few years before you qualify for the PR stream, but the pathway is there and it's clear. So I highly recommend it. Then there's the skilled independent 189 visa. Now, 2 months ago, we just had a huge invitation round for 189 visas. I don't know what happened. People were invited with 65 points and 75 points as offshore candidates. So it's super exciting. It's kind of like, oh my gosh, everybody who wants to apply, let's get your applications together. Let's do this, because they're inviting offshore candidates. So 189 skilled independent visa is points tested, just like the other 2 visas. You can have a look at my videos below. I've done full videos on how to apply for the 189. But it's definitely an option now for onshore and offshore candidates. They've been running invitation rounds every 2 months, but I don't know how consistent that's going to be. So when a client comes to us and they say, okay, cool, I'm a mechanical engineer, this is my qualifications, this is my background, that's exactly what I'll kind of talk them through their options. Obviously, I've mentioned the 491, 190 visa. They're dependent on the state. You'd have to look state to state and see what the requirements are there. But I've given you a very big overview of what visas you could potentially apply for if you are an engineer. So that is the temporary skilled shortage 482 visa, the 190 skilled nominated visa, the 189 skilled independent visa, and the 491 temporary work regional provisional visa. Again, all of them are permanent residency visas except for the 482 temporary skill shortage and the 491 temporary provisional work regional work visa. And I know everybody wants to go for PR first, but as I've mentioned, it's more likely that your employer is going to sponsor you for the 482 first to get to know you and to ensure that, you know, you are the right candidate for the role. They're not going to sponsor you for direct PR. There's obviously costs and risks associated with that, and timeframes as well. 491, again, as I've mentioned, another temporary visa. And at the end of the day, because it is temporary, I do think it's easier to obtain than the 189 and 190 sometimes. But these 2 options, the 482 and 491 that I've just mentioned, are eligible for permanent residency soon after a few years. So I don't think it's a bad deal. Anyway, so I hope that gives you some insights on what you can do as an engineer if you want to apply for a visa, whether it be temporary or permanent residency in Australia. There are a couple of other visas you can look at, but I haven't touched on them today because they're probably less popular and there's other issues surrounding that. These are the ones I'd focus on first. If you don't meet the requirements for either, then that would be the time to get some advice from a migration agent and lawyer to explore other options. If you guys want to get in contact with us and have a consultation with myself or one of our fantastic lawyers or agents, I'll drop our contact link below. And more excitingly, I've just started releasing mini courses. Some of the courses are free, some of the courses are paid, but it goes into a more deep dive into the requirements for all these different occupations, all these different visa streams, and there's some step-by-step how-to guides on how to apply for visas as well. So I hope that's extremely helpful. If you guys liked my video, don't forget to like and subscribe and share this with people who need it. I'll see you guys in the next video.